Things around Bitcoin are about to get really crazy, says U.S. Senator Cynthia Lummis. And she also gives what is likely her final warning about the potential Bitcoin bull run. She says we shouldn't go crazy. If the Bitcoin price skyrockets now, and she indirectly confirms the hyper Bitcoin pump, or at least a very massive Bitcoin price movement. But she's not the only one here. BlackRock confirms this as well, saying that it's just getting started. Everything we've seen so far is basically just child's play. Now the big Bitcoin adoption is just getting started. Is basically just child's play. Now the big Bitcoin adoption is just getting started. Two statements that are really impactful and can't be surpassed in relevance are, but now hold on to your hats. Texas is now introducing its strategic Bitcoin reserve law. And additionally, we see an Italian bank, or rather the largest Italian bank, making a statement that no one would have expected in this way just a few years ago. And now, let's let the cat out of the bag and drop the absolute Bitcoin bombshell. It's all a bit exaggerated, of course, but what's happening right now is really very impressive. And the really special thing is that right now, in a very short time, we're getting a ton of explosive statements from different people. Independent folks are going back and forth about Bitcoin, and one is trying to outdo the other. That means everyone is still throwing out crazy statements here. Crazy statements coming out. But we're actually starting here with Senator Cynthia Lummis, who is really pushing the Bitcoin reserve forward here in the U.S. She even says that in the US, we should sell the gold certificates and massively accumulate Bitcoin. She just says a little reminder now that things are getting crazy and emotions and excitement can really boil over. So this is already very, very important. She says things are about to get crazy. That obviously means massively exploding Bitcoin prices. Is the Valhalla bomb coming? You never know. Definitely. Cynthia Lummis is really going off here and says that the excitement could really boil over now. But you should stay cool here. She says here, don't send Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies to any wallet address or QR code. And as always, it applies. Do your research first. That means, on one hand, she is really bullish. Bullish, clearly confirming an upcoming Bitcoin rally. You can definitely infer that from Cynthia Lummis's words. On the other hand, she also says, hey folks, always stay cool. For example, if you're using Bitcoin, make sure you know how it works. That means really check the wallet addresses where you're sending your Bitcoin. Especially for beginners, this is really important. I always recommend a TREZOR hardware wallet. I'm putting a link here where you can easily manage Bitcoin. And then you can just check the addresses on the wallet here. So basically, you enter the address where you want to send it into a hardware wallet, into the software on the computer. And then you check everything again on the display. Super important, don't just check on the computer display, but check directly on the hardware wallet. You check it on the display there. Because if you want to be safe from hackers and theft, or what do I know, do you always have to check every digit on the display? If everything matches up here. And only when all the digits match on the hardware wallet, then you hit send. And then you can be sure that you won't get scammed or hacked. And stuff like that. And she just says, hey, Bitcoin could really take off now. But don't forget the fundamentals. Don't forget, in the end, to check the Bitcoin self-custody, or basically the wallet addresses. To scan the QR codes correctly and not to scan any random or fake QR codes or anything like that. In the end, you just have to take that away. In the end, always double-check the addresses and really check the numbers in between. And not just the beginning and the end. Then you'll be safe here. That means very, very important words here. From Cynthia Lummis. And then something really exciting happens here. We're now seeing more and more US states presenting their own Bitcoin reserve strategies. And here we have the next one that we're going to take a look at. And that's also very good to take away. Shouldn't present it. It will, in my opinion, come through the states to the extent that many here hope for. Then it will definitely, at least in my estimation, come through the states. Because there are just so many applications, so many inquiries, so many different bills being proposed here, and some bill is definitely going to pass. And if not now, then maybe in a few months and so on. We now officially have the statement from Charles Schwertner, who says it's time for Texas to take a leading role in establishing a strategic Bitcoin reserve. So that's basically his comment on the proposal for a Bitcoin reserve bill in Texas. And he says here, for this reason, I submitted the bill SB 778. Texas, when it is passed and put into effect. would make it the first state in the US to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve. This would put our state at the forefront of the digital economy, drive growth and secure economic freedom for our great state. And in the end, this is a movement that can't be surpassed in relevance, because it's also clearly recognized here. Bitcoin is a tool that can really move the state forward. Bitcoin is a tool that essentially allows citizens more rights to freedom. Bitcoin is a tool here that basically improves life, not just for politics, not just for the country, the USA, but also for the citizens themselves. Here it makes things better. So in the end, it's a win-win situation. Politicians ultimately have happier citizens. Citizens have a better and easier life. Economic productivity is going up. Texas gains capital, innovation, and leads. A whole lot of innovation is going to flow into Texas. And you also have the massive first mover advantage here. That means the first states to do this will have the biggest advantage. States that come in later here, they obviously won't have such a big advantage. But it's kind of like with automobiles in the end. Even if you're somehow 20 years late, it still makes sense. Basically adopting the automobile. Because, let me put it this way, an automobile compared to a horse is still crap. I'd much rather be driving a Ferrari or even, I don't know, even a Fiat, whatever, like a Fiat junk car or something. Even if I mess up with a Fiat, driving around in a car is still way better than riding a horse to work. So I still have a competitive edge over my competitors, or compared to the people who are all riding horses to work here. And the whole thing is still relevant. If you've kind of slept on it for 20 years, that's why. There's no such thing as saying, I missed the Bitcoin party. Because it's like when I say, okay, I'm just going to use torches now. Because when you switch from candlelight to electric light, or when you go from a horse to a car, when you switch from smoke signals to the internet, that's always the right moment. And even if other people were already ahead of you, then it's always the right moment. And even if other people were already ahead of you at the starting line, and I've been using the internet here for like 10 years, then it's still basically an upgrade for your life. When instead of smoke signals, you're using the internet now to transmit information. And it's the same here with the value protocol, specifically with Bitcoin. But now really pay attention, because Robert Michneck was a guest here at Bloomberg. And he says something really powerful here. And he says here, and he says this on behalf of, for BlackRock, at least that's what I'm assuming, because he is the head of digital assets. He says here, Bitcoin adoption is still very, very much in its early stages. And that also means that there's still a massive upside here. So it's not like you've missed out on anything here. Not at all, we're still just getting started. Some compare it to the internet. 1996, 97, that we're still in the early adoption stages. So we're not at the very beginning anymore. I'd say the cyberpunk phase is over. The first wave of institutional adoption might already be behind us. But we're still a long way from being mainstream. And you can basically front-run the Bitcoin price for as long as it takes until the mainstream comes in, and then Bitcoin will probably settle somewhere. Michael Saylor says that the mainstream cycle will be completed by 2045, that the mainstream adoption is over. And as long as you can, your run-of-the-mill neighbor here is front-running. But more and more doors are closing. That means, for example, up until a year ago, you could still front-run Wall Street. That's not possible anymore. But you can still front-run the Magnificent Seven. You can still front-run big companies like Google and Microsoft. And then there are more and more doors closing. You can still front-run the USA right now. But at some point, it just won't be possible anymore. Then you might still be able to front-run a few neighbors, maybe countries that adopt Bitcoin later on. At some point, you won't be able to front-run the Magnificent Seven anymore. And at the very end, you can also have yours. You won't outpace your neighbor anymore, as they'll be forced to use Bitcoin or have a massive competitive advantage. To use Bitcoin here, because otherwise he has a massive competitive advantage. But now here comes the big kicker. Check out what this Italian bank is saying about Bitcoin. And this is the biggest Italian bank making a statement about Bitcoin that just a few years ago, or maybe even just a year ago, was unimaginable. Just take it all in. It's interesting that companies in this field are starting to get involved. Especially banks. What was the rationale?
I think that in this case, the CEO said today at an event that they don't plan to become a Bitcoin company or citizen. Instead, they said they had to be ready in case other bigger clients are interested in buying Bitcoin. Earlier in the year, we reported that they had a prop crypto desk. But so far, they've only done derivatives, what other banks usually have. So it's not a big purchase for a bank. 1 million euros isn't much for a bank, as the CEO also mentioned. But it is a big signal, right, that they're moving into spot because, as you know, to buy spot Bitcoin, you need to have the right infrastructure, you need to have custody. So the step in the signal is pretty significant.
Is the signal that they're putting it on their balance sheet for investment purposes for themselves? Or is the signal more about what they're offering to clients? Anna.
They're saying for now, it's just a test to make sure that it's something they have the capability to do.
So here it's basically being summarized at Bloomberg. What the Italian bank is here. They've made a statement here outwardly. And it's summarized here that they don't plan to become a citizen or anything like that. But they want to be ready here. If bigger clients from the bank want to buy Bitcoin here. And they also did it in spot. So that means they didn't buy any Bitcoin ETFs here, but they actually bought spot Bitcoin. That means they got themselves some kind of hardware wallet, a hardware security solution or multi-signature or whatever. As I said, I'll put a link down here to address her. Hardware wallet. Can you easily manage Bitcoin yourself? They definitely did something in that direction, or it could have been another hardware wallet. I don't know what kind of software they're using. They're probably going to use different hardware wallets. Also, multi-signature is definitely secure. That means they won't make themselves dependent. Here, it's not just one hardware wallet, but several people are involved. Then they will be very, very secure. They're doing multi-signature. In any case, she says that the signaling effect and the impact of what's happening here is extremely high. Who's giving you that? The biggest bank in Italy is buying here. Bitcoin makes waves, and even if this is just like 1 million US dollars, 11 Bitcoin or something like that is completely irrelevant. What's relevant here is the signal to the outside, that they're saying, hey, we don't care about Bitcoin ETFs here. We're really doing this in self-custody. We want to know how this works. And now, very, very important. Here, there are now big players and major clients who, for example, have large assets and, of course, also keep their money in the bank. And now the bank suspects that in the future, there will be more and more people who then, for example, say, hey, I also want to have a Bitcoin offering at the bank now. I also want to manage my Bitcoin here with you. And then the bank needs to know how this works. And if the bank doesn't know how this works, then the customers are just going to leave. So now game theory really comes into play. Whether the bank wants to or not, the bank has to use Bitcoin because if they don't, customers will just go somewhere else. So even if the bank hates Bitcoin here, and we see that very often, also, for example, at JP Morgan, there we have Jamie Dimon, who is really trashing Bitcoin. JP Morgan is buying here. They are directly involved in the Bitcoin ETF game. That's the game theory of Bitcoin. They are an authorized participant, which means they're basically directly involved in the Bitcoin ETF game. And that's basically the game theory of Bitcoin. Even if you're a Bitcoin opponent, even if you absolutely hate it, you have to open yourself up to Bitcoin here. You have to participate in the game. And that's exactly the same thing that happened with the internet. That's exactly the same thing that happened with automobiles. And it's exactly the same thing that happened with electric light. Using outdated methods will lose to internet users and anyone who still relies on candlelight. They're going to lose out to people who are using the internet, who use electric light or who use automobiles. And that's exactly how people who don't use Bitcoin will be in the future. Be on the losing side. And that's why if you're politically in favor of Bitcoin and still want to buy some, I'll put a link for you down below to 21 Bitcoin, the easiest way to buy Bitcoin in Europe. Here, with the code Bitcoin, you can still get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. Let me know what you think about that. See you later. Peace.